morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the YIVO Institute for Jewish Research. My name is Julia Rothkopf, and I'm the Program Associate at YIVO. Today, we have a wonderful program. We have Skybell, Zalmen Mlotek, and Randy Cohen joining us to record an episode of the public radio show, Person, Place, Thing. For those of you who do not know YIVO, we are a wonderful place for the study, contemplation, celebration, and exploration of Yiddish and Eastern European Jewish culture. We are located in New York City, where our library and archive contain over 24 million documents and 400,000 books, which are used by researchers from all around the world. We also have lots of classes on Yiddish language and culture, exhibitions, and programs just like this one, where we aim to bridge the worlds of Jewish culture and our vast archival collection. I would also like to thank the National Yiddish Theatre Folksbiene and Person, Place, Thing for co-sponsoring today's program. Welcome. So I will now read the bios of our wonderful guests, and then we'll get started. We have Stephen Skybell joining us today. He is an award-winning actor, equally at home on film, television, and the Broadway stage. He is currently starring as Herr Schultz in Cabaret, the Kit Kat Club on Broadway. He previously starred as Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish at New World Stages, which won him the 2019 Drama League and Lucille Lortel Award for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Musical, as well as Outer Critics Circle Award nomination. Zalmen Mlotek is an internationally recognized authority on Yiddish folk and theater music, as well as creator of new musicals such as The Golden Land, which toured Italy under the sponsorship of Leonard Bernstein, and Those Were the Days, nominated for 2 Tony Awards. As the artistic director of the National Yiddish Theatre Folksbiene for the past 20 years, Zalmen has been helping to revive Yiddish classics, has brought leading creative artists of television, theater, and film to the stage. And lastly, we have Randy Cohen. Randy's first professional work was writing humor pieces, essays, and stories for newspapers and magazines. His first television work was writing for Late Night with David Letterman, for which he won 3 Emmy Awards. His 4th Emmy was for his work on Michael Moore's TV Nation. For 12 years, he wrote The Ethicist, a weekly column for the New York Times Magazine, and he is currently the creator and host of Person, Place, Thing, a public radio show. And if you enjoyed today's program, I encourage you to join us again for any YIVO program, but notably on May 5th, we will be recording another episode of Person, Place, Thing with YIVO Executive Director Jonathan Brent. And now I will hand it over to our panelists.
Stephen Zalmen will speak about one person, one place, and one thing that are meaningful to them. We're live streaming, and I can test the live streamers have outnumbered us by like what, 50 to 1. There's 25,000 of them.
So many.
And what else? What else do I need to do? Oh, there'll be Q&A at the end, and I think that's it. That's all we need to know. We're a public radio show with the emphasis on show, which to me means there should be live music, and it would be insane if the music were performed by anyone except Stephen Skybell and Zalmen Mlotek.
Thank you. We're going to start with a song, and it actually is the only song you'll hear today that I knew before I met Zalmen, and that is, I grew up in Lubbock, Texas, and my grandfather, who was from Poland, also lived there with us. And when I was around 10, I already started performing with the Children's Theater there, and he asked me to sing this song for him. And I never really thought beyond that. It became a burden, and I got $20 every time I did it, but I never really thought about a deeper reason why he might want this song sung. And it still moves me to contemplate that. So we're going to start it in English, and I always sang it for him in English, but then I'll flip to the Yiddish at some point through it. Of things I should be thankful for, I've had my goodly share. And as I sit here in the comfort of a cozy chair, my fancy takes me to a humble East Side tenement, 3 flights up in the rear, to where my childhood days were spent. It wasn't much like paradise, but mid the dirt and all, there sat the sweetest angel, one that I fondly call my Yiddish mama. I need her more than ever now. My Yiddish mama, I'd love to kiss that wrinkled brow. I long to hold her hand once more as in days gone by, and ask her to forgive me for things I did that made her cry. In Wasser, in Feuer, wird sie gelaufen für ihr Kind. Nicht halten ihr Teier, das ist gewiss die größte Sünd. Oi, wie glücklich und reich ist der Mensch, was hat als a schöne Matone geschenkt von Gott. Nur ein altitschke jiddische Mame, Mame, oi Mame, mine. Thank you, thank you.
It's hard not to think about that as a schmaltzy song. but
Right.
It's so moving.
Right.
And I can't, when I hear it, I can't say, it's like being an Irish Catholic and sentimentalizing your mother, or an Italian Catholic.
Right.
Like,
I mean, the funny thing about that song is that I always sang it for my grandfather. It was only Zalmen 50 years later who told me that is such a famous song. I didn't even know it growing up.
oh, as a kid, it was just like
it was
a little
just the
family
song my grandfather wanted.
And I was horrified that that was the song that he wanted to sing.
But
oh, no.
it is schmaltzy, but I mean, as you can see, it's very moving. It's a very moving.
No,
I mean, and obviously for me, it's become more moving as my mother has now gone on, and you know, just to contemplate one's mother can be a beautiful thing.
Well, for me, what's special about, what became special about it was Stephen's looking at the words in the text. He's so text-oriented as an actor that the words came alive in a way that I hadn't heard before, so.
Well, we could go on talking about my Yiddish mama all day, and we'd be all the better for it. But who's your person?
Our person.
Our person is Joel Gray.
Joel Gray.
You know, Joel was what brought us together.
Right.
When Fiddler was an idea in my head, I thought, well, how do I bring it to life in the most in a way that will attract attention and will have meaning? And I consulted with people like Hal Prince and Sheldon Harnick, and the name that kept coming up was Joel. And when I called Joel, his first response was, I don't speak Yiddish. And
Well-
I assumed that he did because his father was Mickey Katz, the wonderful clarinetist and songwriter. It turns out he does understand a lot more than he says he does. But I said it's not going to be a problem. We have people to help learn, teach the Yiddish. But we want your view of this. He talks about seeing the early performances of Fiddler when it was in Washington. Hal Prince, because of his connection with Cabaret, invited him to Washington to see it before it opened on Broadway.
So, but at this point, you were thinking of him as Tevye, right?
I asked him, actually, I said, would you be interested either in playing Tevye or in directing it? And he said, well, I think my days to play Tevye are long gone, but I would be interested in directing it.
So we said, get me a young Joel Grey, and that was you.
Hardly. No.
Yes.
The way I came to it, I had worked with Joel before. In I believe 2015, in a theater in New Jersey, he had directed the play On Borrowed Time, which was his first play that he did at the Cleveland Playhouse as a little kid.
Wait, he was a child actor, right?
And so the play On Borrowed Time is about a grandfather and his grandson, and Joel played the grandson. And so then he directed it in 2015, and the thing, and I played the doctor, a supporting part, but the thing that was so amazing, even working with him on that, everyone knows Joel Grey as an outstanding entertainer and performer, but the thing that is really a kept secret is he loves the theater, he loves actors, and he is a fantastic director. And I knew that working with him on that first play. And so then the Folksbiene put out on Facebook, I believe, Joel Grey will be directing the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof. So I made inquiries because it just seemed like something that would be an amazing summer gig is what it was supposed to be.
But I can understand why not speaking Yiddish is something you could overcome as an actor. But for the director, I mean, it's the Yiddish Fiddler on the Roof, and were you worried?
He directed the scenes in English at first. Every scene was directed in English so that he could communicate and really hear the tone. And then my colleague, Muttel Didner, and I would sit, do the same scene, and hear the actors do it in Yiddish, and then we would give our notes about inflection. Here's an accent that needed to be, this word needed to be accented in Yiddish while it didn't necessarily need to be accented in English, those kind of things. And so that was the painstaking process so that he understood every moment and he could inject his own vision.
But like I'm telling you, translation is complicated. I mean, it's emotional, and no translation ever replicates the original, and why should it? So it's not just learning it we'll do the scene in English, and now it has different words. It feels different. The words mean different.
Yeah.
That's so challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, it was definitely the most challenging thing I'd ever done as an actor.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, and as we were working with Joel, we only had 3 weeks initially to get it up and perform it. And so we were cramming the Yiddish in our heads, and we would be cramming, and then we would go into rehearsal with Joel, and his first thing would be, okay, let's do it in English. and so then you would have the choice of, well, do I do the Broadway version, or do I try and translate off the fly the Yiddish version?
On purpose, when we offered the scripts to the actors, we had the transliterated text. Underneath it, we had the Joe Stein original or Sheldon Harnick original, and then underneath we had the Schrager Friedman translation, so that they could see exactly what the words meant and how the world knew these words.
That's how we did Latin in junior high. We had interlinear translations. I bet there are other people in this room who had them too, on the same page.
Yeah.
It really helped.
Yeah.
If you were lazy and a bad student like me. So Joel, I think like many people, at least my age and equally barbaric, I really didn't know him until Cabaret. Am I the only one in this room who, yeah, I guess I am. That's so sad. But is that truly foolish?
No, I mean, I think it's interesting. Joel has had a career, you know, he's had a varied career, a complete, exhaustive career, and yet he is identified mostly, if not exclusively, for that one role. And, you know, we would walk on the street, and people always talk to him about the MC. And I do think, I mean, I think that's true. He skyrocketed to notoriety with the MC in Cabaret, and it has never diminished. It really has never diminished. And he, you know, I'm in the Cabaret now, and Joel helped me. When I got cast, he was giving me notes about Herr Schultz and all that. But the amazing thing is Joel won the Tony for Best Supporting Actor as the MC, and he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. But because of his imprint on that role, every production since then, the MC is considered a lead role because of how he crammed it with all it could hold.
It was an amazing thing, and I guess it's another overnight success after, you know, what, 40 years in the theater. Well, and as you were saying, a child actor in Cleveland, and then he changed his name in the 50s, right? From Cats. Well, I don't mean this to be critical in any way. This was a time when
he was born Yussel Katz. And he sings a song. It's one of the songs he loves to sing more than anything about how he changed his name from Yussel to Joel. It's a funny song.
When I was 8 years,
When I was 8 days old,
you know, they named me Yussel.
But then, anyway, but yeah, he changed his name.
And then he made his, because I prepare for these things, he made his Broadway debut in Borschtcapades. I'm guessing no one here saw that.
Someone did.
Someone saw Borschtcapades? Wow. But he was billed as Joel K.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. It's weird. But there's nothing he hasn't done in theater, I would think.
No, I don't think so. He's done everything, in television and film as well.
He was in Star Trek in 1995. No one remembers that. It's always.
But don't forget George M. How he, you know, made the character of George M. Cohen come to life in a way that none of us had ever imagined. His Give My Regards to Broadway, that's an iconic moment.
Yeah.
He came out quite late in life.
Yeah.
I think, and I thought in People magazine, which is, I thought, wow, that's of course the natural vehicle. But it was in 2015, and again, I don't mean this to be critical in any way. It was just interesting.
No, right.
Do you think, because for some people, well, at that stage, you have your public life and your private life, and you're entitled to a private life. Yeah. Why do you think he did?
Well, I mean, we've never discussed it. I would only conjecture. I don't know. I mean, he's a man, I believe, who rigorously hones to truth. And I guess he felt it could be a positive thing for him to own that truth publicly.
You don't know. We don't know. Is it impertinent to even ask? No, because he made it a part of public discourse in People magazine.
No, but I think that's you know, that idea of honing to the truth is something that really came through every day in rehearsal with the text. Every day in rehearsal, every moment an actor did something. I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Do that again. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
He would, you know, after a very moving moment, he would just say, you know, do that again. I'm not there. And so when I think about that, I think that makes total sense.
I mean, that is a lot of people responded to the Yiddish Fiddler in that it was simple and it was true, and that really is what he wanted it to be. It wasn't the Borscht Belt, and it had humor, but it also had great pathos, and we didn't want to slip on the side of just yuck, yuck, yuck if it wasn't going to be true about these people at this point in time in history, because the book To Fiddler on the Roof is so beautifully wrought, it will hold that kind of adherence to and belief in the truth that it's telling.
I had the feeling watching it, well, all of us who see it have already know Fiddler in English.
Right.
But if you didn't, and you walked in and saw it, it would not seem like a translation, I felt. It would seem like, oh, well, this is it.
Yeah.
A lot of people had that same reaction.
Yeah?
And a lot of people stopped looking at the super titles because so many people know the text or knew the story. They said, okay, I know what's going to happen here. Let me see the work of the actors. Let me see how how it transcribes onto the stage. So.
But when you talk about that kind of commitment to the truth, here we're talking about the emotional truth of a character, yeah? But to come out publicly, which I think is a big thing, especially, well, he's 92 now.
Yeah.
And it has a whole different meaning. He grew up in a whole different culture than someone who's 20 now and thinking what's public and what's private.
Yeah.
It's a different kind of truth, and I think it's a kind of truth that takes genuine courage to commit to.
Yes, indeed.
I'll tell you one parallel story about this. I used to work at the Rosie O'Donnell show. Well, when it was first starting, I was the head writer on the startup in the first 6 months of the show. And we'd be in these writers' meetings with Rosie. And she had not come out yet. And the phone would ring all the time and interrupt these meetings, and it was Ellen DeGeneres. And she would just, there were 6 of us sitting there, and she'd take these phone calls, Ellen, and you were only hearing one side, but you got to know, what they were discussing is, should they come out? And Rosie had this, I think, completely realistic fear that if she did, she could lose her show. They would lose enough sponsors, or some people wouldn't want to watch, and I don't think less of her for having those concerns. Right. But this, and again, we're hearing only one side of this conversation, but what I heard was, she said, no, when I'm ready, Ellen was saying, presumably, we'll do it together. And Rosie said, no, when I'm ready to come out, I will do it in the proper way, on Oprah.
Goodness.
So it's not that different from Stephen. From I associate you together so much because of this. Not so different from Joel.
In what way?
These were very accomplished people who had access to very public forums.
Yeah.
And it's a very different kind of question.
Yeah.
They still have private lives. They're entitled to private lives, but
yeah.
their alternative is, it's not like, well, I hate to tell my parents. It's, should I go to People magazine?
Right. I do. I mean, again, and I wouldn't even pretend to speak for Joel, but I mean, I do know that people of certain notoriety, celebrity, and status, they may feel the responsibility to make it visible. And certainly, I don't think he felt like he had anything to lose to do it, and only something to gain by sharing it with the world and putting it out there. And I mean, and certainly, that's what I've done as well in my smaller life, is to be honest about that aspect of my life, and whatever happens in a kind of repercussion of it, so be it.
Well, I think it's an admirable quality of yours and an admirable quality of his.
Thanks.
Time for another song, I think.
Right. So,
are you ready?
Yeah. Can we speak about it, and then I'll go do it?
Yes.
So this is a song that, and why we're singing it after speaking about Joel Grey is that he sings it on, one of the greatest joys of our Yiddish Fiddler production was that we made a recording of it, which is a keepsake for the rest of my life, for myself. But on it are also songs that never made it to the Broadway production of Fiddler on the Roof, cut songs from Fiddler on the Roof. And we're going to sing one now, but Joel sings it on the album. And it's called When Messiah Comes, and it's the song for the rabbi. For those of you who know the musical, at the very end of the play, all the villagers are told they have to leave Anatevka, and And the rabbi's son asked the rabbi, we've been waiting for the Messiah all our lives. Wouldn't now be a good time for him to come? And this is the song the rabbi sang. Sheldon Harnick told us the story that in all the out-of-town tryouts, or in the rehearsal room, it was such a funny song, and everybody was laughing and laughing at the song. And then when it got to out-of-town tryouts, nobody was laughing. And then they realized at that point in the musical, people aren't interested in laughing. And so they took out When Messiah Comes, and they wrote Anatevka and put that in as a sort of love song to the forgotten shtetl, the abandoned shtetl. So
this is what the rabbi would have.
yes. When Messiah comes, he will say to us, I apologize that I took so long, but I had a little trouble finding you. Over here a few and over there a few. You were hard to reunite, but everything is going to be all right. Up in heaven there, how I wrung my hands when they exiled you from the promised land. Into Babylon you went like castaways on the first of many, many moving days. What a day and what a blow. How terrible I felt you'll never know. Since that day, many men said to us, get thee out. Kings they were, gone they are. We're still here. When Messiah comes, he will say to us, don't you think I know what a time you've had? Now I'm here, you'll see how quickly things improve. You won't have to move unless you want to move. You will never more take flight. Yes, everything is going to be all right. When Messiah comes, he will say to us, I was worried sick if you'd last or not. And I spoke to God and said, would that be fair if Messiah came and there was no one there? And the Lord replied to me, wait, everything will be all right, you'll see. Many times, many men took our homes, took our lives. Kings they were, gone they are. We're still here. When Messiah comes and his reign begins, truth and justice then shall appear on earth. But if this reward we would be worthy of, we must keep our covenant with God above. So be patient and devout, and gather up your things and get thee out. It is a good song, and it has a little pathos as well as humor.
Yeah. Cut it. What courage.
Right?
Yeah.
There are other songs, too.
Yeah, there's wonderful songs that the world doesn't know that we recorded of
Salman, would you slide that mic a little?
Yeah, wonderful songs that were discarded because they didn't work in the...
It's still, it takes such nerve to do that.
Right. Stephen Schwartz, the composer, lyricist, calls them murdered darlings.
Yeah,
The
they
songs
have the same expression in writing. A lot of people have taken credit for Kill Your Darlings.
Yeah.
I would if I could get away with it. So where's your place?
The place was the stage of the Museum of Jewish Heritage, where we first encountered what it would be like to present our first audience after weeks in rehearsal. feeling the excitement of what we were doing, understanding that we were doing something that was unique and special. And that very first performance, first preview, July 4th, 2018, packed house, of course, and we just had to stop throughout the show because the people were so moved throughout it, and we all had to kind of gather our emotions as well.
Right. I mean, we hadn't a clue that this was going to be the response. You know, again, when I was hired to do it, it was meant to be a 6-week summer gig at a very unusual venue, the Museum of Jewish Heritage on the tip of Manhattan in the shadow of the Statue of Liberty. And it was meant to be a limited run. And that first preview performance on 4th of July, when Tevye says traditia and the whole shtetl comes on stage, the audience went berserk, and it didn't end. It never really ended. I mean, there was a clamoring to experience it in the Yiddish, and I'll just say, performing it, you know, I rolled my eyes a little. I rolled my eyes a lot when I first got the gig, because it's like, oh, it's Fiddler on the Roof, but it's in Yiddish, and and it's going to be at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, which is a nice way of saying the Holocaust Museum, you know, and yet it was such a meaningful experience to be in that room with young people, but also people who spoke Yiddish as their first language, and people who perhaps this was going to be the last show they were ever going to see. It was going to be Fiddler on the Roof in Yiddish. It became such a beautiful experience to serve this story up, and meaningful, sadly meaningful. In 2018, 2019, anti-Semitism was making a rise very strongly in New York City as well as the world. And so the musical had such meaning, and only doing it in Yiddish intensified the necessity to tell the story.
And the place, the museum itself, you know, has such an amazing exhibitions of what Jewish heritage was and has been, and we just felt that there wasn't a more perfect place for us to present this there. And people came. People were afraid, oh, are people going to go downtown? No, people came because people were, the buzz of the production was so strong that people wanted to see.
So you didn't share Stephen's view that maybe this was too much on the nose. I think we could say that, well, okay, so Fiddler on the Roof, that's pretty Jewish.
Yeah, right.
But in Yiddish, and at this museum, you thought it might be too much, but you didn't. So
no, on purpose. I first heard the album of the Yiddish Fiddler in my mother's home, where she would get my parents would get anything new in Yiddish that was being created. So in '65 they got this recording, and I was a 15-year-old kid already interested in musical theater, and so somewhere in me planted this idea. When I heard this Broadway show in Yiddish, I said, well, someday I would like to do that. And it took me this amount of time to be able to realize it, to say, okay, well, if I'm going to present Fiddler on the Roof after it's been a movie and played in thousands of venues all over, I had to do it in a special way. And I knew that presenting it in Yiddish with everyone really understanding the Yiddish and owning the Yiddish would be the most connected way and moving way to present this original piece of Shalom Aleichem.
Did you always figure on having super titles?
Always. Oh, I mean, you know, super titles. The Yiddish theater, of course, in its heyday, didn't need super titles, right? But you know, in the 70s, they started to use simultaneous translations, and they used headphones. And when I became involved with the Yiddish theater, I said, no, I want people to hear the Yiddish. I want them to hear the Yiddish because some people will pick up a word that they remembered hearing. So we instituted the super titles, and the super titles have been, of course, important as they are in the opera as well.
Did you anticipate there'd be so many Yiddish speakers in the audience at that first performance?
Yeah. I mean, I would say mostly people would. There were a lot of non-Yiddish speakers as well. I mean, our audience is always mixed because the lingua franca that Yiddish was is only seen in the very ultra-religious Jewish neighborhoods at this point. But there are many people who do remember hearing Yiddish, and they'll pick out a word and they'll remember a phrase. And but the super titles, of course, make it immediate so that you can follow along always.
Was it a hard sell to the museum when you called them up and said, "Here's what we have in mind"?
No. I mean, it was something that we knew that it was something that. I mean, I have a tremendous board of the National Yiddish Theatre, and they supported it tremendously, and they helped me put up the money because it was the most expensive show that the Folksbiene had ever produced because it's 26 people, an orchestra of 13. Joel Gray, when he first got involved, he said, well, so he brought all his Broadway friends, Tony Award winners, set designers, costume designers, lighting designers to come see the space. They all fell in love with the space, but they all realized immediately that it had to be a special view of this. I'll never forget when they first showed me the design. I'm sorry. When they first showed me the design of the set for the first time, it was they show a diorama of it in like a shoebox, and the set basically is just these strips of parchment, and I look at it and I'm saying to myself, that's it. That's it. That's the set, a Fiddler on the Roof. And as they started to explain to me, and of course I saw the word Torah in Hebrew spelled, and as they were telling me, I said, we want the story. We want the actors to tell the story. You can't compete with a multi-million-dollar Broadway production downtown in a 350-seat theater. You have to go straight to the material and to the essence of why Fiddler was such a hit. It's because of the text and the music. So they stripped it down, and they got Beowulf Boret, wonderful Tony Award-winning set designer, to come up with this brilliant concept of parchment. And the parchment with the word Torah just immediately put us there, and the world didn't need anything else because the actors did everything else. A chair, a table, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you feel the same way as an actor being on that spare set?
Yes. I mean, I had no reservations about it when I saw the set rendering, and I mean, and those of you who may have seen the production, you do know how the set becomes so meaningful at the end of the first act when the pogrom comes to the wedding and they tear the parchment. To me, that that is such a beautiful, horrible gesture that, 5 Russians with sticks pounding them are not going to convey terror like the tearing of the word Torah. So I thought the simplicity and minimalism of the set also was very potent and made its own contribution to the story.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that was one of incredibly effective things about your production, and that the worst thing I hate a big naturalistic set. The worst thing, I remember it was the epitome of it was, August Osage County, where they built a whole house on stage.
Yeah.
It deprives me as an audience member of using my imagination.
Yeah.
And my emotions are not as engaged. But your production was stark and beautiful, and it drew forth my emotions.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Wonderful.
That guy Shakespeare went a long way with very little sets.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was just thinking.
I try to beat you to those good observations. But yeah, it was so powerful. I wonder, I think that museum, I share your view, it's a really important place. And it has to, it's a fine balance though, because you go, here we are memorializing the most profound tragedies of human history, and then visit the gift shop. And yet they managed to balance that, I think.
I mean, I want to take it back. I think they intentionally chose to call it not a Holocaust museum.
No, it's the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust.
Right.
Visit the gift shop.
Well, but I mean...
That's not part, the gift shop isn't part of the name, but it's built into the institution. But somehow with tact.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Well, I mean, a gift shop is a gift shop. How tactful is a gift shop? But definitely, there are things to purchase there that can keep Judaism and the Jewish traditions alive and tangible with books.
And bring it into your homes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm pro-gift shop in any context. But I think they faced a particular challenge in that shopping is a more or less frivolous act. And the heart of that museum is not frivolous in any way, nor is your production, but it's full of joy.
That's right.
The movement from the museum to where it would then go from there, were you all surprised by that?
Yeah, I mean, we as Stephen said, we were intending to do this for 6 weeks. It became 8 weeks, and then it became 3 months, and then it became 6 months of sold-out performances down there. And so Broadway producers were, seeing what's going on down there and off Broadway, so they would come to it. They came to see the show and started to talk to us about moving it. And we had options. People wanted to go to Broadway. Joel very much wanted it to go on Broadway, and we were advised by long veteran producers like Manny Eisenberg, a good friend, who said, do it off Broadway. The costs are a third of what it would be. Your risk, in terms of it's still a Yiddish show, so you're selling something that you have to convince people who haven't seen it to want to see it. Now, the word of mouth was so strong that we did very well. We did eventually move it to stage 42. Jana Robbins and Hal Luftig were the leading producers who came to us and said they wanted to move it to stage 42, which is a Schubert house, but it was a 499-seat house.
1 seat shy of a Broadway house.
Right.
Not by chance.
Right.
Not by chance, but 1 seat shy from Tony nominations or anything like that, but a third of the cost. So that, and the thing that was interesting is that, because then we revived it at New World Stages, both of those theaters were intimate in a way, and they did try to hold on to the intimacy that we had at the Museum of Jewish Heritage, and I think that was important. I do think that was an important aspect, that we didn't want our show to be in a Broadway house that would make it need to reach further out when the simplicity of it is really what its draw was.
Well, it's, I think, a nice thing in the language that move is sometimes called, a show is translated to another house, to a bigger house, translated to Broadway. And,
right.
It's not just physically moving.
Yeah,
it's translated to
right.
Broadway.
There you go.
That's a big thing.
Right.
And you don't know what will happen. Another song?
Yes. So now we're going to sing a song, I'm going to sing it, from Yiddish Fiddler. Anything else to say about it? The only thing I want to say about the Yiddish Fiddler in general, is that while people didn't feel they needed the super titles, the Schwager-Friedman translation into Yiddish is so beautifully different at moments, and I'll just give you an example of one. So I'm going to sing Sabbath Prayer now, and that, as everybody knows, may you be like Ruth and like Esther. And in the Yiddish, it says Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. The prayer invokes the matriarchs to bless the children and take care of them. And so that kind of distinction, no disrespect to Ruth and Esther, but kind of letting the matriarchs be addressed at that point in time, it makes it feel very authentically Jewish, you know, and I loved that aspect about the Yiddish throughout the script and the lyrics. It was fine-tuned in a way that was really something.
Cool. Let's hear it.
Tate süßer Gott von Avram, kommen soll Meschiach schon schnell, weil es wart auf ihm das ganze Volk von Israel. Sore, Rivke, Rachel und Leah, wenn's die Kinder leulen wollt, Gott en you, mein Gott, und Hitze von der Fremd und Schmand. Gott soll geben von Masel die Kreuz. Wenn der Leben mir einiglich, Schabes soll beim Seidenstisch nicht sein, kein Ort. Tate süßer Gott von Avram, hör das Call von unserer Heim. Leiden mir dich, Gott, mit Shalom Aleichem, Malache HaShoreis. Amen.
So, your thing. What's your thing?
So the thing that we chose was my parents' collections of Yiddish songs.
They're digitally available here at YIVO.
Yeah, the Yisrael and Mlotek Yiddish collection. It's yiddishsongs.org. My parents were lovers of Yiddish songs. That's what brought them together. And they were asked once to do a column for the Yiddish Forward to put in songs that readers would say, do you remember this song? I remember this line of a song. Do you remember it? My mother had this encyclopedic memory. She worked here at the YIVO as the music archivist for over 50 years. Wow. She would be able to tell you where the song was published, who wrote it, who sang it, and then they published these songbooks. So when Stephen, I think it was after the pandemic.
Well, I mean, so with the success of Yiddish Fiddler, all of a sudden people were asking me to sing in Yiddish, and I studied Yiddish, but and I have since studied during the pandemic. I studied at YIVO in a Zoom class for several semesters, but I didn't necessarily feel like a Yiddish speaker, and I certainly didn't have Yiddish song to sing. And so it was during the pandemic. The Yiddish Fiddler had closed. We were now in the pandemic. And Zalmen presented me with these 3 books and sort of said, go to town. And so I would look at a song, and then we would get together on Zoom, and I would sing it with Zalmen, and he would coach me on it. I learned almost 100 songs that way during the pandemic. And it obviously was such a meaningful experience for me to, with Zalmen's guiding me, to really immerse myself in Yiddish song, which in some ways started to feel like a calling of mine in a way, or something that I felt a real personal affinity for. These songs, I mean, the thing that struck me again and again in terms of Yiddish song, anything is fair game for a song. It can be the sinking of the Titanic, or it can be the love of a maiden, or it can be the plight of a pogrom. Anything found its way into musical expression, and I find that so beautiful and deep, and I've never really considered myself a singer of the American Songbook, but I certainly feel honored and responsible to try and give voice to all the wealth of song that's in these books.
And for me, who has been reared with these songs and have heard these songs hundreds of times, for me to hear them out of the consciousness, mind, mouth, heart of Stephen, who approaches everything with every text with such respect and with such a hunger to understand the subtext and where it came from and why the author. It was learning new songs. It was like learning new songs for me. And all these, he said, I want to learn Tumba Alike. I said, oh no. I said, and then he would take the text, and I would listen to the text, and I'd say, that's not schmaltz. That's not overdone. That's new and fresh, and that's how I felt in as he would take any of these songs. So it was very exciting for me.
So your parents were like the Alan Lomax of Yiddish music.
Yeah, I mean, Bashevis Singer, Isaac Bashevis Singer called my mother the Sherlock Holmes of Yiddish song, because she actually had this encyclopedic memory and could tell you when this song was published in 1910 or whenever and where. And these songbooks, and as I say, they're available online. All these songs have the provenance of each of the songs, so you can learn about the songs in addition to the translations, which were so important to my mother, so that people would understand that they didn't just come out of the air.
But where did she actually get them? It wasn't just her memory. At some point, she had to find the sheet music.
Many people sang them. Many people collected them. There were many Yiddish song collectors. Ruth Rubin is one of them, and many others. And there were songbooks published. Of course, there were songbooks published in Russia and in Europe, but these were the first in America to have transliterations, so that the non-Yiddish reader could look at them.
Well, 3 of my 4 grandparents spoke Yiddish in the home. My parents did not. I don't. I barely. I have phrases, and that's it. Certainly, my daughter doesn't. My granddaughter doesn't. Is the language exist only as a museum piece?
I made it a conscious decision with my children to speak to them in Yiddish. I have 3 children. I have 4 grandchildren. I don't speak to the grandchildren only in Yiddish, of course, because they don't hear it anyway, but to my children, the first one I spoke mostly in Yiddish, the second one a little bit less, but each one of them has been introduced to the language just because of my work, et cetera, et cetera. And in the work that the Folksbiene and the Yiddish Theater has done, we've created children's shows, a show called Kids in Yiddish, where we introduce the joys of Yiddish to non-Yiddish speakers.
But in a way, though, for certainly for my daughter or my grandchildren's generation, Yiddish exists as something in a museum, I think, in a way. And there are hundreds of languages around the world that are going extinct. Is Yiddish going to meet that fate?
Yiddish is more alive today. If you were to do a Google search of Yiddish music festivals in the world today, you would be stunned how many festivals and Yiddish concerts and Yiddish classes are happening all over the world, in every corner of the world today, more than ever.
Yeah.
And it's works like this, and many other scholars are publishing songs and recordings, new recordings. The whole klezmer revival that happened in the 70s really owes a lot to the Yiddish song repertoire, of course, to the instrumental repertoire, but most of the repertoire of the klezmer revival is Yiddish song, and that's very popular today, of course.
Do you do any klezmer? You're not a klezmer guy. You are a
Klezmer?
klezmer guy.
What do you mean, klezmer?
A klezmer is a musician, you know, so is he a musician? Of course he's a musician.
And I've sung with klezmer setups. But I just want to say, you know, it is very much alive in the Hasidic communities. You know, Yiddish is. It's
As
so
a spoken language.
As a spoken language, and when I did take these Zoom classes on YIVO, I was struck by. I mean, there were a lot of us, you know, old people, but there were young people taking Yiddish. There was a gal in Germany who she was her year abroad in Germany, and she was taking Yiddish, and I was very heartened by that. And certainly, again, at the Yiddish Fiddler, we would have all ages of people would come up to me afterwards and start speaking to me in Yiddish. You know, so, and I think it was Besheva Singer who said they've been pronouncing the death of Yiddish for 1,000 years, and it still hasn't died. And I do find that you know, the idea of Yiddish land. There is no Yiddish land. It's a country that exists in the speaking of the language. And as long as Jews are alive, and as long as there's Jewish interest in that language, then I am hopeful that the last Jew will have to be gone before the language will go, I hope.
Well, saying there's no land raises what to me is an interesting point, that when Israel was formed as a nation and they made decisions about, well, what's our national language going to be, and they're going to create this modern Hebrew, they turned their backs on Yiddish.
Right.
And they may have made the right decision, but it came with a cost.
Yes, it did.
And that diminished the centrality of Yiddish.
Yeah.
That could have been a Yiddish-speaking country.
That is why in '66, when the Yiddish Fiddler was done in Israel, it was a flop, because no one at that time in Israel in '66 wanted to hear Yiddish. That was the old country, and they wanted to go forward. Would you say?
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah, it was first.
When I grew up in Yerushalayim, there was a lot of Yiddish, there were a lot of modern, and a lot of Hasidic in the same place.
yeah.
Yes.
So do you resent Israel for making this decision?
Well, no, I understand. I mean, Israel was at a time when they needed to be a country where all Jews could be comfortable, and there are, you know, half of the population of Israel, or I don't know, half of, is Sephardic origin, where, you know, Yiddish was not spoken in the home, Ladino was spoken in the home, or Hebrew was spoken. So, could Yiddish have been a secondary language? Of course. Should it have been taught in the colleges and the high schools as an important part of our Jewish panorama? Of course. But you know, there was a country, you know, needed to be built, surrounded by, you know, people who wanted them. You know,
Well, was part of this also that Yiddish at that moment in history, immediately after the war, was so associating with suffering and tragedy, and to start a new nation with a kind of upward, forward-thinking motion, that has to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, course, of course, of course.
So I want to say the other Yiddish theater production that meant a great deal to me that was that you were involved with was The Pirates of Penzance in Yiddish. Did everybody see that?
The Yiddish Pirates of Penzance,
Yeah.
yes.
And it felt to me like, if I were an immigrant in 1914 and was going to the theater on 4th Avenue, it would be like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that an okay way to approach it?
I suppose. I mean, I grew up with, Yiddish songs and Gilbert and Sullivan and Tom Lehrer. That was the soundtrack of my home. Gilbert and Sullivan was, always sung at every Thanksgiving gathering. And I had known about the Yiddish. There was a Yiddish group, Al Grand, may he rest in peace, was a pioneer of creating these Yiddish productions in Yiddish, and I felt, it would be wonderful to see it, so we did it.
Well, thank you. It was pretty great. You'll take a few questions from the audience? Sure. Before we do, join me in thanking Zalmen Mlotek and Stephen Skybell. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to take this opportunity to say that I saw your performance of Fiddler, and in my mind, it was the best, and I've never forgotten it.
Thank you.
And so I want to ask you all, as a group, why do you think this particular Yiddish production of Fiddler resonated with so many people who don't know Yiddish, who are not even Jewish? I mean, we know that Fiddler attracts many, but this was even more exceptional. So why do you think it resonated so much?
The first thing that comes to my mind is hearing Traviata sung in English as opposed to hearing it in Italian, or Carmen heard in not in French. That's the first thing. So people, when you hear it in its original language and you hear it being presented, there is an authenticity that it was so powerful. And I think because the story was so familiar and people were so familiar with the text and with the story, and Yiddish has this magical aura about it, certainly in New York, and I think wherever Jews live, wherever there are Jews of whatever generation, Yiddish was spoken by parents, by grandparents, and so there are Yiddish words everywhere in our vernacular. So to hear it completely done in Yiddish was with people understanding, basically because they knew the show. I think that had a lot to do with it.
I'll also say that playing Tevye, I mean, again, the first time I read the script and I just read the transliterated Yiddish, I started to cry, and that's inexplicable, it touches the Pintele Yid, so that there's a connection. But even non-Jews were responding very strongly. But from the point of view of playing Tevye, obviously anyone who's going to play Tevye has to do it in the shadow of Zero Mostel and all the greats who essayed the role. The beautiful thing that the Yiddish afforded me is that I could somehow bypass a certain comparison because it wasn't going to sound at all like the Zero Mostel recording, and so that was just a load off my back. But or Topol as well.
Did a great job.
Yes, he did. He saw our Yiddish Fiddler, I'm happy to tell you, and he commented on our "Do You Love Me?" That's the way it's meant to be done. So I mean, I take that with me as well. But the idea of not necessarily playing everything for Broadway buffoonery and really just contemplating this impoverished family, I think that to me was very meaningful, and I think people responded to that. And not that we were attempting to do a Chekhov play, which would happen at the same time. I do think Joel wanted us to really consider these characters as people as opposed to types on a comic Broadway stage. And I think, as I said, the piece holds that. So people really responded to it.
Mom, I think I want to ask you personally, when you sing the same song in English and you sing the same, especially as an American,
Yeah.
somebody not brought up in the Yiddish home like Zalmen was, how is that experience for you? Because you kind of alluded it to when you started singing the songs in the transliteration, but with all your experience of singing the same song in English,
Yeah.
is it heightened when you sing the same song in Yiddish? Just want to hear that experience.
It is. It is. I mean, the Yiddish touches something very deeply in me. I had the opportunity after doing Yiddish Fiddler to doing Fiddler on the Roof at the Lyric Opera of Chicago in English. And I was a little concerned because I thought, oh, what's the English going to feel like after the Yiddish? Because the Yiddish feels so deep. And thankfully, there was a cross-pollination for me that I was able to take some of the juices from the Yiddish and let that be in the English. And there are things in the English version that are also very beautiful and meaningful. I'll give you an example of that. Tevye, when he's talking about wrestling whether he should accept Chava and her non-Jewish husband, he finally says, if I try to bend that far, I will break. And the Yiddish is much more voluminous, and we actually pared it down a little from the original Shraga Friedman. It's just the beautiful simplicity of if I try to bend, I will break. In English is very meaningful to me. But having said that, there is something about the Yiddish that is, for me, undeniably connects right to my heart. Yeah, well, no, I'm U.S. I mean, yeah, not for exactly, but I mean, like Randy, I mean, my grandparents spoke Yiddish as a way to obscure their meaning, and so
Yes.
I didn't know what they were saying, but I did hear Yiddish, and I do feel I mean, and it is the notion, it really is in some ways mystical. I think in some ways it might be mystical. The Pintele Yid, that without even consciously knowing why, those sounds and those words connect to something that is kind of beyond my understanding. Or it just excites my imagination to connect to that homeland and to those ancestors. I'm willing to admit that it could be an imagining of mine, but the connection, but it does connect me.
At the end of Act 1, as you've said, the scenery is actually ripped where it says Torah.
Yeah.
When the curtain comes up for the second half, it is not a new banner. It is a repaired banner. And that dovetails so well with the Jewish concept of repairing the world, of tikkun olam. And I was wondering if you could comment about the decision-making process to create that unspoken, very symbolic gesture of we're going to fix it and we're going to move on.
Well, when they showed it to me for the first time, and I was thinking to myself, that's it, and then they started to explain it to me, and they said to me that the concept was to rip it at the end of Act 1, I took it, I got it. And I said, but what are you going to do with Act 2? You can't leave a ripped, it can't be ripped, it can't be, so we came up with the idea of not replacing it with a new one, but to show actually a repaired one so that we could see that it was repaired, because throughout Jewish history, Torahs have had to be repaired throughout the trials and tribulations of our people. So that's why the choice was made to show this ripped Torah. Now, that's a logistical, little bit of a producing nightmare, because you have to have a role, you have to have, for all these performances, you have to have a ripped
Every night it got ripped.
Every night it gets ripped, so in the intermission, you have to put up the new one. So anyway, it's a little bit of a nightmare, but that was the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but thank you for pointing it out, because that was one of the questions that we grappled with at the very beginning.
I want to thank you very much for this. I was actually at that very first performance, and I couldn't understand some of the Yiddish, because actually I know a lot of German, and I heard Yiddish as a kid. What I want to say is that it's the best thing I ever saw, partly because I knew that there were a lot of these kids who had learned dancing spectacularly. It was so impressive, and I wish I could see it again.
Well, it's our hope to bring it again. I just want to say something about the cast. When we announced Fiddler, we had several thousand people apply to be seen. We eventually saw 600 people to pare it down to 29 people. And we saw many, many tevias, including Broadway name people, and then Stephen walked in, and I just remember, Joel and I looking at each other, saying nothing, and just saying, oh my God, who is this? So, yeah, but thank you.
I want to express deep thanks for this fantastic retrospective view of Yiddish theater in the last couple of decades. This has been a fabulous afternoon, actually. One of the most interesting and moving and touching occasions I can remember, actually. So I want to express my deepest thanks. Perhaps you could also give us, having given us this wonderful retrospective, could you tell us a little bit prospectively about what projects you're thinking of carrying forward from here in Yiddish theater or musical and so on? What might we anticipate having the same delight for in the future?
Well, recently we did a performance of where we took songs that were created during the Holocaust and songs of spiritual resistance, and we presented a piece that my son actually wrote. It was called "Amid Falling Walls," Zwischenfallendig event. Stephen, we had the honor of having Stephen participate on it. We are preparing new programs. We are considering a new production of the story of Hannah Senish, the woman heroine, and we have other things that we are contemplating and working on. Traveling around with previous productions, we have hopes for the Yiddish Fiddler. When Fiddler closed, we had contracts to go to China. We had contracts to go to Los Angeles, a national tour, at the Sydney Opera House. So we also have hopes for the Yiddish Fiddler to be seen as well again around. Yeah.
Me too.
What are you doing now?
Well, now I'm in Cabaret, and as I play Herr Schultz in Cabaret, which, as you may know, is the Jewish character in Cabaret. And when I got cast, Joel called me literally probably every other day and was giving me notes about the character and what the character can be. And, I would be foolish to say, like, well, I got a director, thank you, because he had known Cabaret as long as he'd known Fiddler almost. And it's been very meaningful to me to be doing that production of Cabaret right now. And I'm sad to tell you that we had some anti-Semitic instances yesterday during the matinee where I think probably because of the climate in our country, people are feeling emboldened to say things publicly that they may have only ever thought privately. And so that is a shock. I mean, that I was actually quite rattled, and I somehow have gotten through 62 years of life without really having anti-Semitism come at me personally, and I was on a Broadway stage when it happened, you know, so that is shocking, and yet makes the reason why the production exists even more important in my heart, you know, and it's important, and so we'll just shoulder on and see what happens as we progress. But I just want to dovetail back to the Folksbiene for a moment, just to say that one of the very first plays I ever did in New York, right when I got out of drama school, was one of the last plays that Joseph Papp produced at the Public Theater, and it was called Cafe Crown, and it was about the Sardi's of the Yiddish theater on 2nd Avenue, and it had a host of Yiddish performers in it, Marilyn Cooper and Fivish Finkel and Felix Fibbich, and Tressa Hughes and Bob Dishy and Eli Wallach and Ann Jackson were the headliners. And that's when I mean, I had already known there was a wealth of Yiddish theater. There was a heyday in New York City. There was so much Yiddish music to be explored. And so it is no joke to say that Joel Grey and Zalmen Mlotek really changed the course of my career by casting me as Tevye, and the success of the Yiddish Fiddler has been something that that has been wonderful for my career, but wonderful for me personally. And no matter how far I go beyond the Yiddish Fiddler, I definitely consider Yiddish theater and the Folksbiene a sort of heart of hearts home for me, and I would love to also find things to do with the Folksbiene. You know, there's the tradition of Shakespeare in Yiddish and all sorts of things that can be explored, and I hope to do that. I do hope to do that, you know, because I just feel so alive in it and at home in it.
I think our work here is done. Join me once again in thanking Stephen Skybell and Zalmen Mlotek. Thank you.
We have one more song? Or?
Wow!
Yes.
The closing song.
We have one more song, if you'll indulge us. And I would like to just speak about it briefly. So we were trying to think, well, what could a fourth song be? And we chose a love song as opposed to a song about the Triangle Shirt Factory or anything like that. And I do believe, I said this to Zalmen the other day, it is the first song that I learned with Zalmen. And that's all I'll say about it. So I'm going to give you a translation as I sing it. It's called If I Were a Tailor. If I were a tailor, I would sit night and day and stitch for you a beautiful gown, fit for a princess. But I'm only a singer singing pretty songs, so I'll sing to you, my love, and kiss your fingers. Wenn ich wollt gewinn a Schneider, wollt ich Tag und Nacht gesessen und genäht vor dir a Kleidl, wie es passt vor a Prinzessin. Bin ich aber gar a Singer, singen sing ich schöne Lieder, will ich dich, mein Kind, besingen und will kuschen deine Finger. If I were a gardener, I would plant all kinds of flowers, and I would cut the most beautiful ones and bring them to you. But I'm only a singer, singing pretty songs. So I will sing to you, my child, and kiss your fingers. Wenn ich wollt gewinn, a Gärtner, wollt ich Kind meins pflanzen Blumen und die schönste Eis geklieben und mit sie zu dir gekommen. Bin ich obergur a Singer, singen sing ich schöne Lieder, will ich dich, mein Kind, besingen und will kuschen deine Finger. Bin ich obergur a Singer, singen sing ich schöne Lieder, will ich dich, mein Kind, besingen und will kuschen deine Finger gern. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.